we've got perfect. Yeah, no, it was gorgeous weather yesterday in Lincoln, and came home to a beautiful evening, and then we wake up to 39 degrees this morning. So
abrupt.
yeah. The Val from the Panhandle has joined us. So thanks to all of you who are here. Always check in early. My husband is one. If you're not walking in as the service starts, you're too early. And me, if I'm not there 10 minutes early, I'm late. So I appreciate people who have my sense of time.
Early is acceptable.
I was
Lori,
thinking that's why Lori and I get along so well, is because that's how my mentality as well.
Yeah, yeah.
My theory
Yeah.
is if my husband wants to be there before I'm ready to be there, then he can drive himself.
There you go.
Well, that's what my husband and I do when we go to church on Sundays. I leave when I'm ready, and he comes about 10 minutes after the service has started. So thanks, Sherry, for throwing that up. We're going to give people a few more minutes to join us. The joys of Zoom is you can enter the room as this event is starting, so you don't have to plan for a walk or anything. I read something on Facebook last night. If I were to come to your town, what would you show me or tell me about your town? And I thought that might be something that we could talk about in future webinars as we get into the spring and summer vacation months. So be thinking about that for next month, or put something in the chat box. Tell me where you're from and what would you show me or tell me about your community. Nobody has anything they want to tell me about their community? Seeing a few more join us, so we'll let that question sit out there for a couple more minutes before we start. So what would you tell me or show me in your community if I were to come visit? Put your answer to that question in the chat box, and we'll kind of check those out as we can. The Bison Dome, Cliff. Yes, that's an amazing facility. Anybody want to go to Central City? Check out the Bison Dome. It's a storm shelter for the people of Central City, and
With the
part of the
gym.
high school with a gym. Yes. Val would show us the Scottsbluff National Monument. I will take you up on that someday, Val. Okay, we've got a downtown improvement project in Wood River that Tyler would gladly take us a tour on. Love that. Blue says, is that North Platte out? North, okay. Help me out with that one. An outdoor ice rink is pretty cool. Very fun. North Platte Ice Outdoor Rink. Okay. I just had to enlarge it so I could read it.
Yes, NPICE is the nonprofit we started for it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I heard about an outdoor skating rink just yesterday, I think. So, okay. Well, it is just after 2 o'clock, so I think we will get this going. Our speakers have a lot of great information. We're excited to hear from them today. So let me just welcome all of you to the April edition of our HomeNE webinar. We began in February of 2018. So thank you for making HomeNE what it is today. As we were sharing earlier, some of us were at NIFA, got home last evening, and we met many of you, and just thank you for your kind comments and your faithful participation in HomeNE. You filled my bucket or my sponge, however you want to look at it, by sharing your comments and letting me get to know you. So thank you for joining us. South Central Economic Development District is the lead agent for the HomeNE network, which is a statewide learning network geared towards talking about and addressing the housing challenges of our rural communities. HomeNE provides you with face-to-face and online opportunities to foster interaction, engagement, and skill building for our local leaders and people with a passion who wish to successfully address their local housing challenges. Today, we are joined by Scott Dobby and Abe Luters of Omaha by Design. We had a great get to know you session with them earlier today. And if you haven't checked out their website, I love one of the things that I saw on their website. It says that a great city doesn't just happen. A great city happens by design. So I am really looking forward to hearing what Abe and Scott are going to share with us today. So welcome to Scott and Abe from Omaha by Design. And thank you again for being our presenters today. Before you start your presentation, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourselves and about Omaha by Design with our participants?
We'd be glad to. Well, thank you, Lori, and thank you, Sherry. We are super excited to be here. I love the mission of HomeNE and just think it's so important that we get together like this to talk about the similar challenges we face, the similar opportunities we have across the state. I'm actually, though based in Omaha now, I'm a product of Central Nebraska. I grew up in Kearney, spent a lot of time in Minden and Hildreth, and still do as we visit family. We love it. My kids love it. And it's been a joy now to be here working with the team at Omaha by Design. You're looking at 2/5 of our small team here. We're a nonprofit focused in the built environment and in creating a more vibrant and thriving city, just with the principles of being people-centered, combining architecture and urban design and economic development and really everything that makes a place a great place to live. So with that, I'll let my colleague Abe introduce himself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Abe Luters. I'm the Director of Urban Design at Omaha by Design. So my professional field is urban planning. So I went to the University of Nebraska. I actually studied broadcasting. I worked for what's now Nebraska Public Media for a few years, doing some digital media work. But I just had always had a strong fascination with places, what made cities, towns, and neighborhoods work. So I went back to school for urban planning, moved down south, went to Georgia Tech for my master's. And then I actually have spent the last, I guess, about 7 years in Memphis, working as a downtown planner for Memphis, Tennessee. But I've got tons of family here in Omaha. My wife has family, across Nebraska, West Point, Palmyra, which is a little village outside of Lincoln. And so we really wanted to be back here, for family. And this opportunity opened up at Omaha by Design. It's been a great opportunity to dig into a lot of important issues. So are you ready for the presentation?
Perfect. Yep. Perfect. Sorry, I forgot that I was on mute, but yes, we are looking forward to your presentation. Feel free to begin.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll dive right in here. Yeah, as Abe mentioned, we are the Omaha Metro's nonprofit hub for people-centered urban design and policy. He mentioned he's an urban designer. I maybe neglected to mention I'm an architect, but we really bring together a broad array of folks who have a hand in shaping the built environment. One of the things we love to say here is that the city we shape shapes us. And if you think about the opportunities that our cities and towns and villages provide for the next generation to grow up and pursue their dreams and build families and create more great things, it comes back to the environment that we are all based in. And that built environment is what we all have a hand in shaping and what makes it really important that we're doing so in a manner that just sets us up to thrive. And so there are a few areas we really focus in. I'll give you just the briefest overview of the kind of work we do. One of our main buckets, areas of impact as we call it, is what we say vibrant and inclusive public spaces. And this means that there needs to be something sticky about a place. There needs to be something that makes us feel at home. We as human beings just congregate to places such as that. And a good example of the kind of works we do in this space is in bringing public art to bear. And so we've implemented a series in the recent last few years. Nebraska Public Media actually just produced a documentary that ran and that debuted at a movie theater here in town last week. And this we call Art Plus Infrastructure. We have, as you can see, brought together now 40 plus local artists in the production of nearly 50 public artworks across the city. And we hope to expand this. We also think it's really important about how we connect. The success of our cities, the success of our state is in so much and in so many ways built upon human connections, and that also means physical connections. So we work to think about what is our transportation infrastructure. We recognize that a really healthy and vibrant city also has a diversity of choices about how we move about, walking, biking. In our larger metros, Omaha's now building a streetcar and doing all this in a way that encourages circulation and encourages us to see and seek that next opportunity in life. And third, and I think most appropriate to today's discussion, we focus on what we call equitable and sustainable development. And this means that we want to make sure that folks have that access to opportunity that allows them to thrive in their communities. And we want to be building our communities in a way that is sustainable, not only environmentally, but very importantly, economically, fiscally. So we think about what we're leaving for future generations. We want it to give back more than it extracts. And in this space, we can't help but notice there is a great housing challenge that is true to every corner of our state. And we very much feel that here. Abe, if I can say, you're in the midst of a housing search yourself right now. And so very lived experience of how that is. And we, as a convener of a lot of great professionals and passionate advocates who have a hand in shaping the built environment, felt that there may be an opportunity for Omaha by Design to provide solutions or be part of solutions in the creation of affordable housing spaces. So that really led to what we call our Affordable by Design program and what we're here to spend a little time chatting with you about today.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back to the genesis of the Affordable by Design program, a big part of the motivating force behind this was this really comprehensive assessment that was done, looking at what are the housing needs in the Omaha Metro. This was put together by a coalition of nonprofits, including the Omaha Community Foundation, the Sherwood Foundation. And the goal was really to figure out, how big is this need, and how is it going to grow? And, here in the Omaha Metro, what they saw is that based on trends, by 2040, you're talking about adding, about 200,000 new residents in the Metro. So that's including Omaha, Council Bluffs, Sarpy County. And that translates into a housing demand of about 80,000 new housing units. But we also know that when you look at affordable housing, there's this huge gap between the number of people that qualify for affordable housing by income and then how many subsidized affordable units there are. So right now, the difference between the number of households that actually can live in subsidized affordable housing and the number of households that would qualify, it's about a gap of 78,000. As the population grows, as the housing demand grows, they saw that projected to grow into this even larger gap of over 100,000 units, and that gap basically means that you've got, 100,000 people that have incomes low enough that they would qualify for affordable housing, but those subsidized units wouldn't be there. So, there's need for housing at every level of the spectrum, but, the more affordable you look, the larger that gap is. And to deal with this, this report outlined a strategic framework with a lot of different pieces, but there was one piece in particular that kind of stood out to Omaha by Design as an organization. And that's this point D, foster innovations to lower housing costs. And within that section of the report, if I can get to the next slide. They outlined some potential policy tools, and these were based on what's been happening in other metros, some best practices. And in that bucket of fostering innovations, lower housing costs, some of the suggested tools are things like supporting regulatory and zoning reform to reduce development costs, so trying to kind of cut some red tape to allow more housing to be built, removing regulatory barriers to missing middle housing development, and that's something we're going to talk about a little today as well. And ultimately, also this idea of creating a pattern book for new affordable infill housing types. So, basically creating example designs that people can kind of copy, that would be suitable for infill housing, because, we recognize there's a need for housing at a lot of different scales. And one of the things that the market, kind of the existing big producers, don't always do a good job of is kind of filling in those vacant lots. We've got lots of neighborhoods in Omaha. We've got these little infill lots where we need housing. And so creating those best practices. And because Omaha by Design is an organization that really kind of brings together people from the development space, from the design space, we felt like that idea of a pattern book for housing really seemed like it fell into our wheelhouse. And that led to the Affordable by Design Housing Playbook, which was published in 2022.
Yeah, and this launched with an effort that was really new to the Metro, but built off what we'd seen in some leading models across the nation. We brought together some great minds, and the thought here was, can we tackle this kind of the very first and most basic building block of our housing landscape, the single family home. This is the American dream, so to speak. And yet a lot of folks, because of affordability and other factors, we're feeling kind of locked out of that. So we looked specifically kind of in the urban core of Omaha, where in North Omaha, historically African-American neighborhood, we had a lot of empty parcels. And over time, homes had been demolished, vacant, and yet here we are, right in the middle of a metro of nearly 1 million people, accessible to a lot of jobs and education and civic amenities, all that a city has to offer, but underutilized. And was there a way that we could help to accelerate the introduction of affordable housing products in this space? That was the challenge we set out to tackle. And in doing so, we looked at, and I'm not sure which slides I have here, but we actually dove deep into an analysis of what are these lots like? And I imagine in many ways it's similar to many of your communities, where we have what I call kind of the missing tooth syndrome sometimes on a block that has hit or miss. And yet, with all this infrastructure in place, if we could find a way to infill on lots that are actually kind of tight and older city lots, this would be a model that ought to be replicable throughout the Omaha Metro, throughout Lincoln, and throughout cities and towns within the region. So to get to this, we partnered with a great entity. 75 North is a nonprofit based there on the site, the former site of kind of a notorious housing project in North Omaha. And they have led an incredible refresh and rethinking of what this space can be. It's really a model nationwide for what they're doing. And they've partnered with education, and they have senior housing, and they have incubators for small communities. They have a greenhouse, they have coffee shop and office, and so many things now going here. And it kind of spans a spectrum from larger mixed use elements down to what they hope would also include single family housing as it kind of filters out more naturally into the surrounding neighborhoods. And so this presented an opportunity for us as Omaha by Design to come on board with them. We wrote and received a grant to support this work. And then we hired a wonderful design team, partnered with design team, architects, engineers, cost estimators, contractors, to bring together some of that really top shelf knowledge about how do we design something that is by its nature more affordable. And that's what led to these prototypes. They're challenging sites. As I said, they're narrow. They deal with a lot of topography. And we surveyed the community to understand what needs were prevalent. And the outcome was a playbook, a set of prototypes that are meant to be open source. These are completely free to anyone who wants to take them and use them. And the first several of these have now been constructed at 75 North as kind of a proof of concept. They are just now under contract, and so they'll be welcoming their first family soon. And we learned a great deal through this process and are now hoping to take these models and not only share them throughout the community of Omaha and other communities region-wide, but perhaps even get them incorporated into sort of a pre-approved plan book. That if someone were in the market, maybe it's a small developer thinking this, or someone who wants to be a homeowner is looking for an option, these are off-the-shelf plans, free for the taking, that had been pre-approved by the municipality's authorities having jurisdiction. And so you could walk into the planning department and walk out with a set of plans you would know would be approved. With some minor site adaptations, you could be well on your way towards an attainable and affordable and proud and well-designed single-family home. That was our dream, and I think that is the path that we're on.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'm just going to kind of flip through a little bit of the original playbook. So the playbook contains schematic designs for these houses. And the core concept was just to create a really, really simple footprint. So, you've got this kind of long and narrow, almost, kind of like a shotgun home style footprint that's really suited for those long, narrow lots. But, with really flexible spaces. So, concentrating, plumbing all in one area, concentrating, services circulation in one area. So creating these really efficient floor plates. And these are things that can easily be customized, can easily be swapped. So it's really this core concept of having, a really simple structure. And, of course, when you go to build these, the closer this is to a box, the easier it is. And so kind of starting with that high level of efficiency, but kind of starting from that concept, we worked out 4 different design concepts. I'm not going to go into a lot of details on all of these, but again, the idea is also providing some variation. So these are all kind of based on some of those simple concepts, but you're creating variation, you're creating options. The playbook contains schematic floor plans for all of these. So as an example, here's one of them, the Patrick. And this is just an example of how these things can be customized. So this version of it is you've got 2 bedrooms, you have an unfinished basement, you've got an attached garage. But this is an example where you take that same floor plate, no garage or no basement in this case, but you have 3 bedrooms above. You have the kind of the same basic plan, but you're just swapping out those components to kind of meet a certain price point, to meet a different consumer need. Here's an example showing, hey, well, you could also easily attach an addition on here, and so this is showing kind of a conceptual addition. So maybe you start with something smaller, but then you add on later. So it's all designed around this idea of flexibility. And Scott mentioned the whole team of people that are brought onto this. In some of the work that's incorporated this playbook is there's a long section with energy analysis, to kind of find what are some best practices for energy efficiency, with the goal of not just saying, well, these are the 20 things you can do to be incredibly efficient. It's also looking at, well, what's the best bang for the buck? What are the things that are low cost and high impact? And depending on your budget, that kind of gives you this menu of options. This graph is really helpful, kind of showing, what some of those things were. And there's a lot of, there was a consultant that worked on this. And so there's a lot of great intelligence there that, again, that's just free to access. Also worked with a Systology, a universal design consultant. And so there's information in the playbook, showing things like, kitchen plans and build outs, providing for universal access, because that's something that was really important, was to kind of integrate, accessibility into this. For example, aging in place is something that's been a huge conversation. And so kind of designing for accessibility from the get-go is something that seemed like something really valuable we could bake into these plans. Mm-hmm. There's, suggested interior material palettes, 3 different options. Again, this idea of starting with simplicity, but giving, some options that are easy to go, with a focus again on making this affordable. Not having incredibly expensive materials, but selecting materials that have some longevity to them, have some character to them, but are also relatively affordable. And, again, to that idea of providing for flexibility and visual difference, also included 3 exterior material palettes, and this kind of shows you how that same basic home plan can look very different depending on materials. So this, ranges from this more traditional design to more modern design, and there's also this transitional design that's kind of in between, which is really what the actual homes that were built by 75 North ended up falling under. This is just an example of a single home plan kind of going through all 3 of those palettes. And a part of the intention there is that we know there are a couple different ways that these plans can be used. You have, in some cases, maybe you're building this on a single lot in the middle of the neighborhood. And so your goal would be, well, let's select, maybe one of those exterior palettes that fits into the neighborhood, that, is really contextual. But we also know that, maybe you have 10 lots and maybe you're doing a row of these and you don't want to just do a row of identical boxes. And so by providing those 4 different prototypes, different exterior packages for each of those, it actually allows you to create, possibly an entire street of these homes, but no one home looks the same. They all have personality, because that was really something that was important to us, because we're looking at this, partially through the lens of, good urban design, good architecture. It shouldn't just look like a house that's just kind of, plopped down like a tract home development. We want these to look high quality. And as Scott mentioned, those first playbook homes, they were constructed. These are pictures from 2023 when they were going up. And actually just about a month ago, these went on the market. And if you've got great eyesight, you can see that on these Zillow postings, all these homes are listed as pending. So these homes were listed for $250, which may not sound incredibly affordable, but in Omaha, in the Omaha market, the new construction single family home, is typically going to be closer to $350K. And so these did go pretty quickly. And that first playbook is completed. So all that design info that we kind of did a brief rundown on, really encourage you to go to omahabydesign.org/playbook. That's just free to download, free to use. These aren't construction documents. As Scott mentioned, we're kind of working towards hopefully kind of getting these, at least in the city of Omaha, to pre-approved plan status. But these are schematic designs that, a builder could look at, an architect could look at. You're free to copy these, to steal any ideas you want. And it's just something that's, again, you can use any element of these designs without any kind of fear of, infringing on anyone's intellectual property. It's meant to be open source. So kind of looking ahead, so that document was finished, and I want to touch on something that's kind of in progress right now, is following the completion of the single family home designs, something that really stood out as a great additional challenge would be to tackle the problem of missing middle housing. And you all may have had some sessions on this before, but this is something a lot of people are thinking about, the fact that in between single family detached homes and larger apartment developments, historically, in cities and towns, you had all this housing in between, going from, duplexes to triplexes to cottage courts. These are multifamily buildings that are on the scale of a house, and so they can typically be built with similar construction techniques as a single family home. It's something that, currently in a lot of neighborhoods, it provides a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing. But there are a lot of challenges to building this again today, and there's been a lot of attention paid to this. And so we really felt like going into missing middle housing designs, this was a great way to provide an even more attainable entry point for homeownership. We saw that $250K price tag on those other single family homes. That is much more affordable than other new single family homes in the Omaha Metro, but that's not affordable to a lot of people. And so we recognize that maybe building these missing middle buildings could be a way to provide even more affordability. We also know that just in terms of regulations, it's more challenging to build these. And so as we go through the design process, we thought this would be a great way to identify, what are the barriers to building like this? Looking at these things that used to be in our neighborhoods, why can't we build these now? Just yesterday, Scott and I were in a room with city planning people here in Omaha, walking through some of these plans and talking about, what do we need to change, in the code to make this possible. And creating a model to add some context sensitive infill that allows for some more density in our neighborhoods. That's something in both cities and towns, providing a little more density is really important for, walkability, for financial sustainability. And so we think missing middle is a great way to do that in a really human way. And, again, these are just examples of, what we mean when we say missing middle, going from duplex, all the way to townhomes. Those townhomes, those are actually townhomes that were recently built in Omaha. So that's a real project here. And similar to how we partnered with 75 North in that first round, where we had a development partner that actually had parcels they were looking to develop on, we've partnered with another nonprofit in Common Community Development. They're a nonprofit that does incredible work with affordable housing in a couple neighborhoods, including the Park Avenue neighborhood, which is the neighborhood that they're focused on for this project. They have 4 different lots in the Park Avenue neighborhood. It's a neighborhood just west of downtown Omaha. And they want to do missing middle housing, and they want to do it to actually sell the units, which is really unique. And we're working with Holland Basham in this round as our architectural partner. And so, we think that this model of going through a design process, creating these designs that are meant for a general audience, but focusing on a real world project, it's a really unique model because, sometimes if you're just kind of in this realm of ideas and your ideas are just kind of floating somewhere, it doesn't force you to kind of answer the hard questions that a real development poses in terms of site challenges, actual regulations. And so even though we'd love for these designs to be applicable to a lot of situations, we think that working with a specific, developer on specific lots actually helps you, to answer some more questions in a really tangible way. And so, in creating these designs, our architects have had to look at, well, what are the site regulations? Because you've got this lot, but you can't cover the whole thing in a building. You've got to look at the zoning, look at how much of this is actually buildable, which in some cases, look at that smallest lot on the right-hand side. That's a really, really small buildable area. And so, in some cases, this is an opportunity to maybe raise with the city. Are there some exceptions, that might help get a little more housing on these sites? Look at those front yard setbacks. If you actually look at some of the existing homes and buildings in the neighborhood, those are actually larger setbacks. It's not the same setback because older neighborhoods often do not have kind of those generous, setbacks that the code might require now. And just like with that first round, we've had a lot of great stakeholder engagement. So this is an image of one of our stakeholder engagement events where we had, people from the development world, architecture world, people from the neighborhood, really talking through, the potential of the sites, what would fit on the sites. Our architects did a great job of organizing a workshop with neighborhood residents in conjunction with Uncommon. So we had a Spanish translation here. The neighborhood, is a very large Hispanic population. So we had translation to really, talk to the community, try to gather information on what they really valued, what they would be looking for in this kind of housing. This was our most recent stakeholder event where we were able to kind of look at some example floor plans and comment on them. So, a lot of great minds, kind of being drawn into the process. And we think that this kind of process is always stronger when you have, more people than just us. We can talk about this stuff all day, but, we don't know that much. And so, get a bunch of people in the room and it just makes the process go better. Some of the feedback we got from these stakeholder groups, one of the things that was asked was, when you think about what's affordable, what is that starter home price that you're looking at? And so when we asked that question of, what's a starter home, like a starter single family home, what do you want to pay for that? Overwhelmingly, people are looking in that range of probably under 200K, which again, just doesn't exist in our market anymore. And so, we recognize that there's this desire for housing at a much lower price point. And when people think about, what they would want kind of a unit in a missing middle building, so like a duplex unit or something, they're even looking at a lower price point. We think that given current construction costs, it may be difficult to develop at this, but it's just really good to know that this is kind of what to shoot for. Like we want to get as low as we can because, we think that that's still where a lot of people are financially. There was also tended to be more interest in terms of, how many units would you be looking at for, a unit of housing to own? Typically, people are looking at, 2 bedrooms and above. And again, this is with looking at this through the lens of ownership. we think that, in this market at least, it may be challenging to sell someone a 1-bedroom unit. In a lot of cities, that's not the case. But, we're still a city with a lot of space, historically fairly large housing. And so it was really good to kind of get that community feedback to really target sizes for these units. And when we asked about, what kind of housing to pursue, typically people are also looking at smaller buildings, things like duplexes, fourplexes, nothing larger than that. And that really aligns with what we're trying to get with kind of neighborhood scaled housing. And I'll just briefly show, some of the prototypes we've been working on. So a couple different housing typologies. We're looking at a townhome plan. One feature you notice here is that one of those units is recessed a little bit, and that's to allow for some variation. One of these units gets a front porch. If you had like 4 of these in a row, they wouldn't all kind of look identical. You'd get some more visual interest. There's also a stacked duplex plan. So this is a 1-bedroom stacked duplex unit. They're also looking at a 2-bedroom stacked duplex unit. And so basically you would have 1 unit on the bottom floor, one unit above, but the scale of it would be pretty similar to a house. And one thing I'll show in another slide is that I'm using the terminology of stacked duplex because that's primarily that's probably what they'll kind of take to a higher level of design. But these floor plans have been designed in such a way you could actually make it into a quadplex by essentially, mirroring this. It's all kind of designed to center around a common stair. And so I'll show a slide of what that looks like in a second. And there's another typology we're looking at where it's an up-down triplex where there would be a 3-bedroom, kind of a large family unit on the ground floor with 2 1-bedroom units above. You can imagine in some context that could be a really attractive ownership product where someone owns the whole building and they could live on the ground floor and have 2 rental units for income. And so kind of creating space for that kind of incremental neighborhood wealth building is also a really interesting opportunity with missing middle housing. And this is that example I was showing where, those modules that could be a stacked duplex, they've been kind of intentionally designed so you could kind of take those floor plans and, really combine them to get more housing on these lots. Whether that's possible per code, it really depends on regulation, but the design intent is there to provide flexibility. And if you had a larger site, you could actually kind of create, different types of housing typologies out of those same modules. This is just an example of that Woolworth lot. That was the lot that we showed the picture of, which is the largest lot in Common has, showing some of the work around test fitting. Of course, one of the big challenges with these is providing parking. That's been a big discussion. So this is showing one example where we have that triplex. Another one is showing 4 townhome units. These are still being refined, but we're really looking at what could we really do on these sites and making sure that it's buildable. So the missing middle version of the playbook is something that we're working to get finished up this summer. So we're really excited about that. There's a lot of work that's left to be done, but the progress has been great. And then we're also, we continue to kind of look for new opportunities to, apply design thinking to housing problems. And one thing we've talked about a little bit is that, one of the things we're focusing on right now is creating these open source designs. We also recognize that there's a lot of room for innovation in the regulatory processes. How is this stuff zoned? How are these developments approved? Each of these playbooks has involved a little bit of a look at that of, what are the regulatory constraints? We think there may be room, in the future to maybe create a document that really focuses on the regulation. So, designing a better process. And as Scott also talked about, pursuing this idea of pre-approved plans. These images are examples from South Bend. They have a kind of a neighborhood infill pattern book with missing middle plans that are pre-approved by the city. We would love to do this for both the single family homes and the missing middle units if possible. There are some hurdles, but it's something that the city is really interested in doing. And like Scott said, this would make the development process a lot easier where you have these plans that are essentially kind of plug and play. You would have to create a site plan, of course, for your own site. But the city has already seen the plans. They've already reviewed them. So you get an accelerated approval process. And just you want to make it easy for people to do the right thing. You create these great designs to make them easy to build, and we really think that'll help with making better infill housing in Omaha. So again, the URL for that original playbook is omahabydesign.org/playbook. When the new chapters are released, it'll probably live on that same URL. But we'd love to hear any of your questions, and our emails are there. If you want to bug us via email, we love to hear from people from all over.
That's right. Bring it on.
Okay. Well, thank you, Scott and Abe. So this is the time we open it up to questions from all of our attendees today. I was fascinated by what you just shared. I hope that some of our rural communities were on, because that seems to be one of the issues. They want plans that have been approved. They don't want to reinvent the wheel each and every time they want to build something. So this, I think, is very helpful. So super. So what questions do you have for our speakers today? Please open your microphone or put that in your chat box. I did see a comment from Amy Hawsey, who's instrumental and very invested in the missing middle. And she was giving you kudos for that Woolworth Avenue project. She's excited to see that completed. So,
Well, Amy knows her stuff, so that's high praise.
Well, thanks, Scott. I go by that lot frequently, and I'm very familiar with that neighborhood. So yeah, it's exciting to see. I'm also really excited to see as you guys develop that stacked duplex piece a little bit more, because I've it's not a model we see here in Nebraska in general, but it's very common in a lot of other locations, even in Illinois and Indiana and other places like that. And it was interesting when we were working with the city of Omaha and we asked some of the builders about it. They talked about some of the costs that you have and the separation that you have to do. So I'll be really interested to see what you guys start to find as you dig into those in a little bit more detail. Because I think they're, for a tight lot, I think they're a really interesting idea.
It has been fascinating to dig into, and this is true so much of the entire missing middle spectrum, as Abe showed that nice transect that went all the way from a single family house all the way up to a really large multifamily. It's not as though any one of us is unfamiliar with what's in the middle there, but as a society, we've kind of forgotten how to build many of those products over the last 50 years, and it's a bit of a relearning process and readapting. Once we have models in place, I think what we're finding is many folks say, well, that's really attractive. I like that. Or even if it's a unit with shared walls, it's that opportunity to say, I don't have to mow the lawn. I don't have to shovel the snow. Like there are a lot of situations where single family homes certainly is not one size fits all for everyone.
Yeah, and I think kind of some of those practical questions, like the floor separation, everything else, I think again, it's kind of a muscle that developers just need to exercise, because it's doable. People have built these before. I just had a chance. I don't know if you've had any presentations on the Prairie Queen development in Papillion, but that's a really interesting development where Jerry Reimer, a local developer here, has done hundreds of units, all in missing middle buildings, like creating basically, this whole neighborhood of these building types that have not been seen, in new developments in decades. Again, like having stacked units, having, he's got units over the parking garages, like essentially like building in garage ADUs, and I think all of the kind of practical things that are discovered when you actually build this stuff will just build this, level of knowledge, among local contractors and developers, and I think we'll get better at it.
Yeah. Tell me, we have a question. Are these plans approved by the Department of Energy and Environment? If you're doing trust fund new construction, your plans have to be approved. Have you ran them by that entity?
We've sourced it through the NDE yet. I could be wrong about that. I could check. But certainly these were produced with a high level of energy analysis. To have a professional mechanical engineer and systems engineer come on board early in the design process, we looked hard at not only what did the code require, but where is, as Abe kind of alluded to earlier, where is that optimal level where for a product like this, where affordability does matter, but it's not always just first cost affordability. Let's look at the payback period. Let's be smart about insulation, orientation, everything with even, we got as precise as the routing of plumbing throughout the system and consolidation of lines and access for maintenance. Like those next levels of design thinking that don't often make it into a starter home. We feel like it's really important to set folks off on the right foot with a home that's going to be really high performing.
Cool. Yeah. Great answer. So that had crossed my mind too. So, yeah, what questions are coming to mind for Scott and Abe this afternoon?
Lori, I have one.
Great. Cliff, go ahead.
We are really concerned about the impending clash between affordability and insurability. And with the effects of climate change, we're seeing a steady increase in weather-related claims. Our insurance premiums have been going up dramatically, and now insurance companies are starting to cancel. Some areas are going into captive markets where they're saying the mandatory deductible will be 10%. So a $300,000 home suddenly carries a $30,000 deductible, which is really a problem in affordability. Some areas can't even get insurance. At the housing conference this week, we were told that in the very near future, we could expect requirement of certain materials like steel roofs and cement siding as a condition of insurability. Some of that is going to be very new to developers. I know there's steel roofs out there, but finding the right roof and the right combination is what we rely on architects to do. And I'm really asking, are there people, have you guys looked at that? Do you have ideas? Are there some things we should be looking at, things we should be avoiding? Kathy, I see you came on. Do you have something to add?
Well, I was just saying, I know that you had a slide there that said future projects there after you get past the missing middle component. I mean, this would be another area where I think developers would have a real interest in looking at some of the material selections that allow us to accommodate both the affordability to the extent possible, both the affordability and the insurability issue. So I'm kind of chiming in with what Cliff was saying, but I do have another questions. You take care of this one first, but.
All right, we'll come back to you. Kathy and Cliff, though, that's a great question. And I mean, I wish we could say that wasn't an issue, but you're 100% right. It is a real issue and it's emerging and growing. Though we didn't specifically delve into that in great depth yet, I would say that tangentially, I think we've thought about questions like that and could do so more in the future. When I look at a lot of what it comes down to is just a little bit like building these typologies, as Abe said, it's familiarity with the detailing. It's familiarity with how to get this through the code, how to work this. It's not always the material cost, but it's the availability and the labor availability where you need it to be able to appropriately handle that in an affordable fashion. And so one of the things I could see having an open resource playbook be helpful in is to really be a great go-to resource for those details that fit directly with the home you're planning to build, to look at steel roof detail, cementitious siding and all that. And then another area we've been exploring here a little bit more broadly in conversation with other groups looking to address the housing affordability issues we have in the metro is what would it mean to pool resources in a sort of a generating economies of scale sense. So are there common building materials that if purchased in one-offs, we see more price fluctuation, but if we can buy in bulk and perhaps warehouse them, windows, common surface building materials, siding, and could it be steel roofing or whatever, could those be strategies to hold down the overall cost per housing unit? Things we'd be very interested in exploring. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think you covered it.
Well, back to you then, Kathy.
Well, just as a comment to your last comment, I had a conversation with a large roofing contractor this morning about all of this, and he was actually taking, he asked for a copy of some roof plans for projects that we often build, and he was actually going out to several regional managers with some of these that were handling some of these more impact resistant types of roofing issues, and saying, look, the affordable housing community in Nebraska is going to be moving in this direction. What kinds of products can you sell us, and at what rate for statewide, for a statewide program? And I think that's kind of where we're going to have to get to, is all of us as developers are going to have to look to some of these large concerns to help us find ways to buy down those costs. So absolutely what you're saying, doing some warehousing even of a lot of this stuff. The question that I had, it does kind of go to these local codes. Quite a number of years ago, Cliff and I built an apartment complex at one of our community colleges, and they were built in a little bit like these design parts. I mean, the apartment building itself is a stacked design, basically. And we got all of our numbers in, and of course those numbers way back when look really good right now, but at the time they were big numbers to us. And we got all the way to the end, and then all of a sudden the city walked in and said, well, you've got to double up your staircases and run them each direction in order to get these people that are all within one. I mean, they were all within 10 feet of a staircase, but we had to actually run double staircases to make it work. And the added expense, was amazing. We've got to figure out a way to not only kind of package some of these plans, but we've got to figure out a way to get some of these zoning administrators and building code administrators to start looking at all of this differently also. There's got to be some real movement on that end in order to maintain. I noticed some of the designs that you have where you have stacked duplexes. If you go back in and have to do what we had to do, your affordability is going to tank. And so that's the only comment I was making, is we have to make a concerted effort to be working with our building codes and with our code administrators and figure out what we can live with, and from a safety standpoint, as well as from the affordability angle.
Yeah, and that particular issue, this double stair requirement, that's something that now is getting, national attention. And it's a good example of something that, I believe that comes from the International Building Code. And so, it kind of requires, a local amendment to that. And I think there's starting to be some models for, what code requirements are kind of a good target for some, local or state, adaptations. Because just recognizing that there are certain things that, you can do safely without, and trying to, figure out what those things are. And, a part of that is also looking at international models, because, like single stair multifamily buildings, very common, lots of countries, you can do them very safely. But, again, it's just a matter of, by default, people use the default code. And so unless, people kind of band together and identify specific things to reform, it just won't happen. And so that's something we're excited to do on a local level here, is, to kind of maybe be a part of that effort to identify some specific things like that, where you could change some code requirements, keep really core safety requirements, but allow for things that just enable stuff to get built.
Right. Yet another playbook for you.
Well,
Yep, a lot of potential. I don't know
We
how
wanna
many of these
keep
you want to
going.
do, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
I think that's one of the things we hear often is just the lack of unanimity and consistency. If all codes were alike, it would be so much easier, better for the developers. They would know what to expect as they move from community to community. So great conversation. What else is out there that you might want to ask Scott and Abe today? We did have a question about today's webinar. Yes, it will be available on our HomeNE website, so you can show it to others. Yeah. What other questions? Do you have any?
I don't have a question, Lori. I have a comment, and that is we just returned from 2 days at NIFA, as many of you on this webinar did. And I think that, hearing from Lynn Rex at the league and NACO, the Nebraska Association of County Officials, has been real interested in helping county commissioners and supervisors understand the importance of making economic development happen. And economic development doesn't happen without housing development, right? They all go hand in hand. And I think that puts us in a really good position to be that advocate in our municipalities and working with the league and whoever else to get that message out that we need some uniform. Lynn was talking about uniform but flexible, because what works in Valentine for foundations and whatever isn't going to work in Omaha, and just because of soil types and all, but things that can be as uniform and as welcoming as possible. And just remembering that the people that are serving on village and city councils and even county boards, they don't live in your world. And so rather than us being frustrated, we have to just be patient and educate them and bring them along to help them understand what a great role they can play and what an asset they can be.
Great thoughts. Thank you, Sharon. Last call for a final question for our speakers. Well,
I think it's
hearing
a
none.
terrific project, by the way, Lori.
Pardon me, Kathy?
I said, I think what Scott and Abe are doing, it's a terrific project. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, great. Great forethought and putting up an open source document and resource out there for communities to tap into is incredible. So thank you. Let me just thank them for, go ahead, Scott.
If you mind, maybe I guess I have a bit of a question, or maybe it's a request. This has been a great privilege for us to be able to speak with you all today. Thank you for the time. I mean, we absolutely love it. We're excited about this work. We want to see it be impactful. We feel that momentum happening here. We'd love to see it spread across the state. If there's any way we can be helpful, my ask to you is, would you just please let us know, reach out, absolutely download the document, test it out, throw it against the wall and see how it works. My only ask of you is that if it does, and if it's something that gets you closer and closer to constructing, we would love to hear about that. We don't ask anything more, but we want to learn and continually improve this playbook and our processes by real world conditions. And so if you do have the opportunity to test it in any way, we would just love to hear any feedback you'd share.
Well, we do have a final question. Do you also have a playbook for trauma-informed design? Or could that be added to your playbook?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's something we've looked into yet. But
Yeah.
like we mentioned, I mean, there's just so many different avenues to take this. So I think our big challenge is kind of figuring out, what are the questions that make the most sense for us as an organization. But yeah, there's so many different questions and different lenses to put on these problems. So it's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Judy. Important kind of as we pursued accessible design and such, there are many deeper levels we can get to that do inform and that would be wonderful. So great note. And yes, Rick, I'll tell my folks hi.
You can't go anywhere without somebody knowing some of your family when you live in Nebraska. So, well, let me just wrap up by making a couple announcements for all of you. But Scott and Abe, I do want to thank you again for taking time and sharing with us today. I'm again energized, and I think this is a real opportunity for rural Nebraska to address some of those infill lots by tapping into the resources that you're making available. So thank you very much. So back to the question of how can we share this information? We do have our HomeNE.us website, and today's webinar as well as past webinars are housed there. So feel free to share those with people in your community, your village board, city council members. Have them take a look. You can search for different things. And then finally, today is the day that we announce our upcoming annual gathering. It will be Thursday, June 6th, and we teased you last month that we were going to Central Nebraska. Today, we're excited to let you know that on Thursday, June 6th, we'll be convening in the small community of Ansley, Nebraska for the morning. We'll be doing some teaching around housing-focused topics, and then we'll travel by bus to Broken Bow for lunch, and we'll continue to hear from speakers throughout the lunchtime and the afternoon. And then we will conclude back in Ansley at the end of the day. So I'm excited. Highway 2, Highway 183, they'll all get you to Custer County. And registration is again $99 this year. And Sherry, do you want to just give us a quick update on registration status?
It is live. Well, you guys were asking questions. I went and turned it live. So you can register anytime. We're ready for you.
Okay, perfect. You don't want to miss this. Being from Central Nebraska, it's one of my favorite spots to spend time. So I even shared a Custer County sunset with you. You can't miss out on those either. So I hope we'll see you June 6th in Custer County. And as we introduce those communities to you. And then next month, our webinar is on Thursday, May 16th. Joe Johnson, a name you may be familiar with, will be talking to us about tax increment financing. We heard about TIF more in detail yesterday at the NIFA conference. So I'm excited to have Joe join us as well. So once again, thanks again to Scott and Abe for their time and for the diligent work that they're doing. We greatly appreciate it. And do you have any final thoughts, comments, Scott, Abe?
And no, we just really appreciate the chance to share. And yes, please reach out if you got any questions, suggestions. We just love to have the opportunity.
We've passed on that slide. Would you tell us again one of your emails, and people can reach out to you should they have questions?
Yep. So the email addresses are really simple. So mine is Abram, ABRAM @omahabydesign.org, and Scott's is Scott @omahabydesign.org.
Simple enough.
If you go to that website,
Okay.
I think all the contact info is there as well.
Okay, and there they are on your screen. So thank you to all of you for joining us today. And Scott and Abe, thank you again. And have a great rest of your day, everybody. And we'll see you
Sherry?
next month.
Sherry,
Yes.
checks in the mail.
Oh.
Our
Oh,
first
Randall.
registration. Thank you. Have a
Perfect.
great day, everybody.
Thank you all.